I still remember the moment I realized something was deeply wrong. It wasn't the wedding snub, no, that pain came later. It was the moment I walked outside the hall after slipping away quietly and saw my own name on the vendor's final invoice pinned to the gate, fluttering in the night wind like it was mocking me. Someone had posted it there. Someone wanted everyone to know who paid, who carried the weight, who was taken for granted. The paper slapped against the gate as the wind blew, the ink smudged, but the numbers painfully clear. And as I stood there staring at the bill for a ceremony that had erased me, I understood something unsettling. I was never seen as family, just a wallet with a heartbeat. That was the night everything in my life began to crack. And this is how it all happened. Hey family, before we dive into this powerful story, don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss the next one. Please like this video, drop a comment to share your thoughts or lessons you learned, and give your honest review. I'd love to hear what you think. Now, let's begin the story. My name is Bako, and if you walk through the dusty streets of Makuro, you might hear people call me the quiet carpenter. I lived a life that didn't make noise. I worked with my hands, paid my bills, minded my home, and tried to build a future for the one child who is not mine by blood, Mina. I met her mother, Yara, during one rainy season market day. She was selling vegetables under a leaking umbrella, and I offered to help her carry her baskets home. That small kindness somehow led to another, and before long, we were married, and I became stepfather to a girl with bright eyes and questions that never ended. Mina was 9 then. A quiet age. An age where a child is still soft enough to shape and still loud enough to laugh without shame. Her biological father, Sorrow, lived 2 towns away, but might as well have lived on the moon. Sometimes he called. Sometimes he vanished. Always inconsistent. So I stepped in, not because anyone forced me, but because love makes its own doorway. I paid school fees. I braided her hair when her mother came home late from the shop. I attended every visiting day in secondary school. I sat with her through heartbreaks, arguments, teenage storms, and exam panic that made her cry into my shirt. People in Makuro used to say, Bako loves that child like his own. I did. Maybe that was why the ending hurts so much. Because when you give love freely, you never expect to one day feel like a stranger. At the time, I didn't know the future was preparing a painful lesson, that love without boundaries can turn into a shadow you lose yourself inside. The day Mina told me she was getting married, the sun felt brighter than usual. Makuro was noisy as always, children shouting, traders arguing, buses honking, but inside me, everything felt soft. She stood in the doorway in a yellow dress, smiling so wide I could see the gap in her teeth she refused to fix. Baba Bako, she said, I want you to help me plan my wedding. Those words warmed my chest. I felt chosen, seen, appreciated. We sat under the mango tree in front of the house, the shadows dancing around us, and talked about her dreams. She wanted pastel colors, soft flowers, simple decor, and a hall big enough for both families. I told her, don't worry, I will handle it. And I did. I went with her to every meeting, caterers, decorators, photographers, tailors. Sometimes I waited for hours because vendors in Makuro don't know how to keep time. Sometimes I paid deposits without telling her mother because I didn't want Mina to worry. She called me my hero. She sent voice notes thanking me. She hugged me after every outing like I had moved mountains. I didn't know those hugs were the last time I would feel like her father. Things started to change slowly, like fruit spoiling from the inside. One evening, we were reviewing the guest list when her phone rang. Her face lit up in a way I hadn't seen in years. It's Sorrow, she said. Her father. The man who disappeared for birthdays, school plays, and graduations. She started speaking to him more. Laughing in ways she never laughed with me. Telling him all the plans I paid for, plans I built. At first, I was happy she had him in her life again. I thought maybe this was healing. But little did I know, sometimes when old doors reopen, they push out the people who kept the house standing. The rehearsal dinner was held in a newly renovated rooftop hall overlooking Makuro bustling night market. The air smelled of pepper soup, fresh dust, and city lights. People were dressed well, the music soft, the laughter warm. But something felt wrong the moment I stepped inside. It was the way Mina avoided my eyes as she walked past me. The way Sorrow, her father, held her shoulders like he had been there all her life. And the way people kept whispering, that must be her real father. I pushed the whispers aside and smiled. I didn't want drama. Not during her moment. Then came the speeches. Her uncles spoke. Her cousins spoke. Her mother spoke. And then Mina stood up. I waited for my name. Just a 2-second mention. A simple thank you. She thanked her mother. She thanked the guests. She thanked the caterers, decorators, makeup artists, even the DJ. And then she said, I am so grateful my father could make it here today. The hall clapped. Sorrow smiled like a king being honored. Mina's eyes shone. My chest tightened. For the first time that night, I realized I might not be her Baba anymore. But I told myself, maybe she forgot. Maybe she panicked. Maybe the wedding stress is too much. I swallowed the hurt like hot pepper and forced a smile. But the night was not done breaking me. Because after the rehearsal, I overheard her bridesmaids gossiping near the restroom. One said, I heard she wants her real father to walk her down the aisle. The stepfather will understand. Understand what? That I was good enough to pay, good enough to plan, but not good enough to stand beside her? That was the first real wound. Small but deep. And by the next day, it would become a scar. The morning of the wedding started like any other. I woke before everyone, my heart heavy but trying to hold on to the small hope that maybe, just maybe, Mina would see me before the ceremony. I got dressed in the idbada I had chosen weeks ago, the soft fabric cooling my skin but failing to soothe my nerves. I looked in the mirror and adjusted the cap on my head, straightened my collar, and took a deep breath. I arrived at the hall early, as usual, making sure everything was perfect. The chairs were arranged neatly, the flower arrangements bloomed like freshly watered gardens, and the hall smelled faintly of roses and incense. I watched the staff moving around, putting the final touches in place, and for a brief moment, pride swelled in my chest. I had helped build this day, just as I had helped build Mina's life. Then she arrived. Mina stepped out of the car, glowing in her wedding dress, and my heart should have leaped with joy. Instead, it sank. She looked radiant, but she was not looking at me. She was looking at Sorrow. I noticed the way her eyes softened when she saw him. The way she adjusted his tie, laughing like he was the man who had been there every step of her life. The way the photographer kept capturing them in frames that could have been ours, frames that I had imagined, frames I had hoped would include me. The walk down the aisle came, and I realized with a cold stab that I would not be the one to guide her. Sorrow took her hand. He led her forward, and the words she whispered to him, words of admiration, of gratitude, of love, I should have heard them. Instead, I heard silence. The guests cheered. The photographers clicked. And I sat in the second row, holding back a storm I could not yet name. I tried to smile, to clap, to participate in a joy that felt borrowed. But every cheer reminded me of all the mornings I had gotten up early, all the nights I had stayed up worrying, all the tears I had wiped from her cheeks. And yet, none of that mattered today. The first slice of betrayal had been cut, and it had my name written on it. The reception hall was alive with music, laughter, and the clinking of glasses. The scent of jollof rice, fried chicken, and sweet pastries filled the air, mixing with the faint perfume of lilies. Guests laughed and danced, but I could not move. I was anchored in the second row, watching a life that I had helped shape slip from my grasp. The speeches began. Her uncle spoke first, praising the couple and wishing them happiness. Her mother spoke next, her eyes warm, but clouded with the unspoken tension between us. Then came Mina's turn. She stood, holding the microphone as if she were stepping onto a stage she had prepared for someone else. She spoke of love, of family, of support, and I listened carefully, every word like a shard of glass in my chest. She thanked her mother. She thanked the vendors. She thanked the friends who had helped. And then she said, I am so grateful to my father for being here today. Sorrow smiled, and the hall clapped. Not a word for me, not even a glance. I felt numb. The pain did not hit like anger at first. It was quiet, deep, like sitting under a heavy cloud that you know will eventually burst. I watched her laugh with Sorrow. I watched him hold her hand. I watched the photographs being taken, each one a silent reminder that I had been erased from the picture of her life. For a moment, I considered standing up, raising my voice, demanding recognition. But I stayed seated. I watched. I let it wash over me. By the time the cake was cut, something inside me snapped. The years I had invested, the money I had spent, the nights I had stayed awake worrying about her future, all of it felt invisible. I made a decision. I would not wait to be appreciated. I would not be taken for granted any longer. Quietly, I slipped out of the hall. No goodbyes. No explanations. Nothing. The party continued behind me, the laughter echoing like a cruel soundtrack to my departure. And as I walked into the quiet Makuro streets, the wind carrying dust into my face, I realized that sometimes love is not enough. Sometimes standing up for yourself is the only way to survive. The next morning, I woke to the hum of Makuro coming alive outside my window. Children ran barefoot down the streets, women sold fresh bread and tomatoes, and the aroma of roasted corn drifted through the air. I sat on my porch, still wearing the igbata from the wedding, thinking about the night before. A phone call shattered the quiet. It was Mina. Her voice was frantic, panicked, trying to sound sweet, polite, unaware, or maybe guilty. I didn't know which. She asked me about the final payments, the balance for the hall, the caterers, the photographers. I listened, letting her words flow over me. And then I said simply, clearly, "Mina, ask your father." Silence. I could hear the small stammer in her voice as she tried to argue, to explain, to justify. But I held firm. I had given my love, my time, my money. I had been invisible. I would not be invisible and the ATM. She tried again, sweetly, almost pleading. "It's not like that, Baba. I just wanted Sorrow to feel included." I cut her off, voice steady, unwavering. "No. He is your biological father. There is a difference. I raised you. I was there every day. If you cannot see that, then I cannot pay for your choices." She went silent. I hung up. The relief was strange, heavy, almost terrifying. I was alone, yes, but I had reclaimed something that night. Respect. Dignity. My worth. Yara, my wife, was quiet too, walking around the house, pretending everything was normal. But I saw the tension in her shoulders, the way she sighed when she thought I wasn't looking. For the first time in 15 years, I understood something crucial. Being dependable is not enough. Being taken for granted is a lesson you must teach yourself. After that phone call, a strange silence settled over our home in Makuro. The market noise, the chatter of children, the distant calls of the street hawkers, everything continued as usual outside, but inside, the air was heavy. Yara moved carefully, walking on eggshells, as though one wrong step would make the quiet explode. She didn't scold me. She didn't question me. She just watched. And I watched her watch me. I didn't feel victorious. I felt steady. For the first time in years, I was not bending to someone else's idea of love or duty. I was standing on my own. A few days passed. I received glimpses of Mina life through Yara-hushed conversations or the gossip of neighbors. She and Sorrow had their moments of chaos, the kind I had long anticipated. He forgot meetings, disappeared when they needed him, and yet she still clung to him like a lighthouse in a storm. I didn't gloat. I didn't comment. I just held on to the quiet strength that comes from knowing your own worth. That silence taught me more than any argument could. It whispered truths about love, respect, and boundaries. And sometimes, silence speaks louder than words ever could. By the third day after the wedding, whispers reached me like needles. Vendors at the market shook their heads knowingly. Bako, you left her wedding? Her father disappeared again, I hear. Your stepdaughter learned the hard way, who's really reliable. I moved past them, letting the words wash over me.
I didn't care what they said.
Their words were not my story, but the whispers did carry one truth. Mina was struggling. The wedding, so meticulously planned, had left bills unpaid. The vendors called. Sorrow was nowhere to be found, and my heart, a small part of it, felt vindicated. Not for revenge, not for pride, but because life has a way of teaching lessons that people refuse to learn from words alone. I stayed busy in my carpentry workshop, letting the smell of sawdust and the rhythm of hammering fill the gaps that silence had left. Each piece of wood I shaped became a reminder. Some things you build cannot be taken away, not even by ingratitude. And yet, late at night, I found myself wondering, would she ever see me as more than someone who pays for things? Would she understand, or was it too late? I waited for Mina to reach out, for an apology, for even a small acknowledgement. I waited for a letter, a voice note, anything. Weeks passed and my phone remained silent. The absence of words can be deafening. I went about my daily life, repairing furniture, helping neighbors, cooking with Yara, but the shadow of her silence lingered. I remembered the mornings when she would run to me with school papers or a scraped knee. I remembered her laughter echoing in our small courtyard. And now nothing. One evening, I held a pen, hoping to write her a letter, to tell her how much she mattered to me, not as her stepfather, but as the man who raised her. But the words caught in my throat. If I wrote it, would she read it? Would she understand? Or would she twist it into blame? I put the pen down. Some lessons, I realized, cannot be forced. They must be learned through life itself. And Mina, she would have to learn hers the hard way. Yara was quiet, but I could see her observing every moment. She didn't scold me for leaving the wedding. She didn't scold Mina for her behavior. She just existed alongside the tension, her presence steady like a river. One evening, she came to my workshop with a cup of tea. I was sanding a chair, lost in thought, when she placed the cup beside me. "You did what you had to do," she said softly. "No lectures. No guilt. Just acknowledgement." Her words were like water on dry soil. I realized then that she understood, maybe more than I did at the time, that love cannot thrive without respect. We didn't speak much after that. But her quiet support gave me the strength to hold my ground, to continue being myself, and to stop waiting for gratitude that might never come. Through snippets of conversation and village gossip, I learned that Mina and Sorrow were struggling. Bills were unpaid. Appointments missed. Arguments whispered under the cover of night. I did not intervene. I could have reached out, could have offered money or advice. But I didn't. Watching from afar, I realized that sometimes the lessons you refuse to acknowledge in youth must be faced in adulthood. Sorrow had shown himself for what he was. Mina had made her choice, and life was proving the consequences. I stayed in my own lane, tending my small business, fixing broken chairs, carving tables, and listening to the rhythm of my own heartbeat. Sometimes, survival means stepping back and letting reality do the teaching. Weeks later, a call came. Mina's voice was soft, uncertain, different. She sounded humbled. "Bako, can we talk?" I paused, holding the phone tight. The humility in her tone was unmistakable. It was not the Mina I had seen at the wedding, loud and certain, oblivious to my pain. It was someone who had felt the weight of her choices. I didn't speak immediately. I let her words settle over me. The city hummed outside, but inside, time seemed to pause. I realize I treated you like a stranger," she whispered. "And I am sorry." For the first time in months, a flicker of warmth returned. I did not rejoice. I did not forgive fully. But I listened. The path ahead would be long. Trust, once broken, cannot be rebuilt overnight. But the conversation, it was a start. And in that moment, I remembered a simple truth. Knowing your worth and refusing to settle for less is never selfish. When Mina's call ended, I sat in my quiet living room, the faint hum of Makuro outside filtering through the window. The words, "I am sorry," echoed in my mind like a fragile melody. It wasn't forgiveness yet. Not fully. But it was something, a crack in the wall she had built between us. For 15 years, I had been invisible in her life in ways she didn't even realize. I had given, sacrificed, and nurtured. And yet, all that care had been taken for granted, replaced by a shadow of a father who barely existed. I reflected on that reality. How often had I stayed silent, hoping love alone would be enough? How often had I given, only to be seen as optional, replaceable? Humility is a heavy burden. It teaches you to see beyond anger, beyond pride, beyond immediate satisfaction. And Mina's voice, soft and tentative, carried that lesson to me. I didn't celebrate. I didn't smile. I just let it sink in. She was beginning to understand. And understanding is the first step toward change. The following days were quiet. I sat quietly, thinking. Yara occasionally brought me tea, silent in her understanding. She didn't push me to reconcile. She didn't ask about Mina. She only provided the space I needed. I reflected on the years I had spent raising Mina, the early mornings getting her ready for school, the nights staying awake to calm her fears, the sacrifices made, often unseen, always necessary. I realized I had learned something too. Love without boundaries can be destructive. It can blind you to your own worth, to your own dignity. I would not let that happen again. The quiet was not lonely. It was restorative. It was a reminder that self-respect must come first. And sometimes, stepping away is the only way to protect it. A week later, Mina called again. Her voice trembled slightly, like a child taking the first step on a shaky bridge. "Bako, can we meet?" she asked softly. I didn't answer immediately. I let the question hang in the air, measured, deliberate. This was not just about a meeting. It was about acknowledgement, recognition, responsibility. Finally, I said, "Come tomorrow. We'll talk." She arrived the next day, looking smaller than she had in my memory, more fragile, more aware. No big gestures, no grand apologies. Just quiet, nervous presence. We sat on the porch, the sun casting long shadows over the dusty street. She spoke hesitantly, stumbling over words. She admitted mistakes, gaps in understanding, and the pain she had caused. I listened. No interruptions. No anger. Only presence. Sometimes, that is all a person needs to see, that they are heard, that they are recognized, and that change is possible. Mina's words made me think about the lessons life teaches, without warning. She had believed that sorrow, occasional appearances were enough. She had assumed that love is measured in grand gestures, in fleeting presence. But I had taught her the opposite, that consistency, care, and sacrifice are the truest forms of love. And now she was learning. Slowly, painfully, beautifully. I realized that sometimes people only understand the value of what they have after they have lost it, or nearly lost it. I didn't gloat at her struggles. I didn't rejoice at her realization. I simply held the space, waiting for her to take the steps toward understanding. Life has a way of teaching lessons that words cannot. And sometimes, those lessons are only learned through experience. Over the next few weeks, Mina and I began small steps toward rebuilding trust.
We didn't rush.
We didn't pretend the past hadn't hurt. We spoke about simple things: the market, her work, the neighbors. We laughed over small memories, shared quiet moments on the porch, and slowly, the walls between us began to crumble. Yara watched quietly from the sidelines. She knew better than to push. She knew the healing process cannot be forced. I realized that love is patient, resilient, and sometimes silent. It is not about grand gestures. It is about showing up, being present, and respecting boundaries. And slowly, Mina began to understand. Months passed, and Mina's understanding grew. She began to see that love without recognition can feel hollow. She began to grasp the sacrifices I had made, the years of presence that had gone unnoticed. We didn't speak of the wedding much. The event itself had faded into memory, but its lessons remained vivid. I watched her grow into a woman who understood responsibility, accountability, and respect. I realized that my role was never about controlling her choices. It was about guiding her, standing firm in my own worth, and letting life teach the lessons she needed. The quiet, the distance, the silence, it all worked as a teacher. And slowly, Mina began to learn. One afternoon, Mina came to the workshop, carrying a small notebook. Her eyes met mine, tentative but determined. "Bako, I've been thinking," she said, flipping through pages filled with scribbles. "I want to understand more about everything you did for me." Her voice carried a new humility, a maturity that had not been there before. She spoke slowly, carefully, as though each word was being tested before it left her mouth. I listened without interrupting. For 15 years, I had been shaping her life silently. Now, she wanted to shape her understanding. We talked for hours. I recounted memories, moments she had forgotten. The nights I stayed awake worrying about her future. I shared the sacrifices, the choices, the small victories that had gone unseen. She nodded, absorbed, sometimes murmuring small acknowledgments. I could see comprehension dawning. It wasn't instant forgiveness, but it was a start. For the first time in months, I felt a lightness. Not because the past had changed, but because the future had begun to shift. A week later, Mina returned, bringing with her a small envelope. She handed it to me silently, her hands trembling slightly. Inside was a letter. The words were carefully written, deliberate, filled with honesty. "I am sorry, Bako," she had written, "for the way I treated you at my wedding, for forgetting all you did for me, for letting him take the place you deserved. I see now. I understand now. I hope you can forgive me." I read it slowly, absorbing each word like water on parched soil. I did not respond immediately. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in my pocket. Forgiveness is not always instant. It requires time, reflection, and a willingness to let go of hurt. And I could feel that Mina was ready to begin that journey. Her eyes met mine, waiting, hopeful. And for the first time in a long while, I saw the daughter I had raised. Not the girl clinging to a fantasy, not the bride who had forgotten me, but the young woman who was learning the truth. We didn't speak much more that day. Sometimes, presence speaks louder than words. And for now, her presence was enough. The weeks that followed were delicate. Mina and I began rebuilding our bond slowly, carefully, like planting seeds in dry soil. We walked through the streets, talking about the market, our neighbors, small events that felt ordinary but were extraordinary in their simplicity. She asked questions about my past, my decisions, even about the wedding day. I answered honestly, without anger or blame, letting her learn the lessons life had prepared for her. Trust is fragile. Once broken, it cannot be reconstructed in a single day. It requires patience, consistency, and transparency. And Mina began showing the first signs of change. Her voice, once confident and dismissive, now carried humility. Her laughter, once careless, now included gratitude. And slowly, the walls between us began to crumble. Sorrow absence continued to define her lessons. The man who had claimed fatherhood was nowhere to be found when his responsibilities became inconvenient. Mina realized that his presence had been conditional all along. I never used this to punish her or lecture her. Instead, I let life show the truth. Sometimes, the people we idolize are only present when it suits them. And learning this lesson firsthand is far more powerful than hearing it from someone else. Mina's eyes grew sharper. She began to measure actions, not words. And I quietly observed, proud not because she suffered, but because she was learning the value of consistency, of loyalty, of real love. Every day, I noticed small victories. Mina would ask for advice before making decisions. She would include me in minor plans, showing that she remembered and valued my presence. She began acknowledging the work I had done, the care I had given. These small acts mattered more than grand gestures. Because love is not measured in celebrations, ribbons, or dresses, but in the recognition of effort and devotion. Yara watched silently, offering smiles of encouragement. She knew that healing takes time, and that true respect cannot be rushed. And together, we let Mina learn these lessons in her own way. One evening, as the sun dipped below the rooftops, I sat on the porch, watching the shadows stretch across the dusty streets. Mina joined me, quietly, without speaking at first. We watched the children playing, the vendors closing shop, the distant hum of life continuing despite our own personal struggles. And I realized that life itself is a teacher. It gives lessons in ways we do not expect, through absence, through challenge, through quiet observation. Mina's growth was evident. Her humility, her understanding, her willingness to acknowledge the past and move forward, these were victories. And I felt a warmth in my chest, not from vindication, but from seeing the fruit of love, patience, and resilience. Sometimes, the lessons we teach are learned in silence. Sometimes, the impact of a lifetime of care is only understood after it is almost lost. And in that quiet evening, I knew that Mina was finally beginning to understand. Mina came to my workshop one humid afternoon, carrying a small basket of fruits from the market. Her eyes met mine, steady now, without hesitation or fear. "I want to talk, Bako," she said, her voice calm. For the first time, we spoke openly about the wedding, not the glitz, the flowers, or the dress, but about feelings, choices, and responsibilities. She admitted her mistake, how she had ignored the years of love I had given her, how she had put her absent father on a pedestal, and how she failed to recognize my sacrifices. I didn't lecture her. I didn't shout. I simply listened. And as she spoke, I saw a glimmer of understanding, the first true acknowledgement of our shared history. It was not enough to erase the pain, but it was enough to start rebuilding trust. In Makuro, we were no longer stepfather and stepdaughter in conflict. We were two people trying to bridge a gap built over 15 years. It was the kind of conversation that changes everything, quietly, without fanfare. Weeks turned into months. Mina began showing signs of growth I had longed to see. She began acknowledging small gestures, remembering birthdays and anniversaries, even the little sacrifices that went unnoticed in the past. She began asking for advice on finances, work, and relationships, showing a level of respect that had been missing before. Her words were no longer hollow promises. They carried weight, thoughtfulness, and intention. I realized that the lessons of life, though often harsh, had begun to resonate. Sometimes it takes losing respect, feeling the absence of care, and witnessing the consequences of misplaced trust to truly understand. And as I watched her mature, I felt pride, not in vindication, but in seeing her grow into someone who could recognize the value of love and presence. One evening, Mina asked if we could take a walk through the market together. I agreed. We walked slowly, side by side, observing the familiar chaos of Makuro. She began to share her dreams, her fears, and her reflections on the past year. For the first time, I felt a sense of equality in our relationship, not as stepfather and stepdaughter, but as two humans learning from each other. We laughed, shared small memories, and even debated minor disagreements like old friends. The bridge that had been broken was slowly being rebuilt, plank by plank, step by step. And in that moment, I understood something profound. Healing takes time, but consistency, honesty, and patience will always pave the way. Mina began to internalize the lessons I had tried to teach her for years, that love without respect is empty, that presence and consistency matter more than fleeting gestures, that life often rewards those who stand firm in their dignity. She no longer idolized sorrow or measured her happiness by his attention. Instead, she learned to value those who truly invested in her life, those who showed up even when it wasn't convenient. And I learned too. Sometimes, standing firm and letting life teach the lessons is more effective than arguing. Sometimes, love is not about pleasing others but about protecting your own worth. In Makuro, but inside our small home, peace had returned. We had survived the storm, and the lessons had settled deep into both of us. The day came when Mina called again, this time with warmth and genuine appreciation. "Bako, I want you to be part of my life again, truly," she said. No pretense, no expectations, just honesty. We spent the afternoon talking, laughing, and sharing memories that had been buried under years of misunderstanding. I realized that this was a new beginning, not just for her, but for both of us. We didn't erase the past, and we didn't pretend the wedding hadn't hurt. but we acknowledged it, learned from it, and allowed it to guide the way forward. Months had passed since that fateful wedding. Mina and I had rebuilt a relationship based on understanding, respect, and love. I realized something essential. Knowing your worth is not selfish. Refusing to be taken for granted is not cruelty. It is survival. I had spent years giving freely, hoping that love alone would be enough. And when it wasn't acknowledged, I stood up for myself. I protected my dignity. And in doing so, I taught Mina one of life's most important lessons, that love is strongest when it is mutual, recognized, and respected. Mina still had her journey ahead. Sorrow remained distant, as he always had been. But she was learning and she was growing. And me? I was at peace. The wedding had not been mine, but the lesson, the growth, and the knowledge of my own worth, those were all mine. Life goes on, noisy and chaotic. But inside, I carry quiet triumph. And sometimes that is enough. God bless. Hey fams! If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to come back to my page, Folktale by Us, because we have more exciting, emotional, and powerful African stories waiting for you. Hit that subscribe button, smash the like, and drop a comment telling me what you feel or which part touched you the most. Every like, every comment, every subscription gives me the power and strength to bring you more stories from Africa, stories that make you laugh, cry, and reflect. So don't just watch, join the family, share your thoughts, and let's keep the magic of African storytelling alive together. Remember, new chapters, new stories, new lessons every week. Be part of it. Be part of Folktale by Us.